A little bit of a shorter shiur today because of Rosh Chodesh, but let's go. So we are on Daf Kaf Gimel Amud Aleph. We've been going through from the Mishnah again the procedure of essentially the procedure of Makkot, how it actually takes place. We're about halfway down the Amud, maybe a little bit. About halfway down, near the beginning of the line where it says Hamakeh Makeh B'Yado. So if we just go back and look at the Mishnah for a moment, what did the Mishnah tell us? It said Hamakeh Makeh B'Yado Achat B'Chol Kocho, the person who is giving the lashes, he hits with one hand with all of his might. So now the Gemara over here discusses who is the person, who is the Chazan HaKnesset, who is the Shaliach that Beit Din appoints to perform the lashes. So we have a braita. It says Tanu Rabbanan. Ein ma'amidin chazanin ela chasirei koach v'terei mada. So say Rabbanan that we appoint the chazan, the shaliach, the person to administer the malkot. That can only be somebody who is chasirei koach, meaning somebody who's not too strong, v'terei mada, and somebody who is intelligent. This way, the person who's giving the malkut, it won't be too great, but he'll be able to withstand it. It won't be too painful. Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yehuda says even the opposite. So a bit of discussion over here when Rabbi Yehuda says afilu chasirei meida v'terei koach. So it could even be somebody who's not intelligent, somebody who's just a brute, right? Somebody who has that strength and he's going to hit really, really hard. Doesn't mean that Rabbi Yehuda means you have to choose somebody like that. He says afilu chasirei meida v'terei koach. It could even be somebody who is like that. Tosfot over here points out, Tosfot at the top of the page, he says nirali dapali Tanna Kama dama ein ma'amidin klal chasirei meida. So Tanna Kama said, no, you can't. Somebody who's not intelligent and somebody who just has the strength, you cannot appoint them. Rabbi Yehuda says you could appoint them. He says the ein medaktekin b'davar. Says we don't have to be so exacting in terms of who we appoint. Either one is fine. So it says Tosfot, you might have thought, I think there are Rishonim who learn this way, that it has to be dafka, somebody who's not intelligent and has got that strength. But he says no, you don't have to. But you could. Right, Rivan says the same thing. Says afilu terei medav, afilu terei koach, vafilu chasirei meida. You can see in the Rivan he has a slightly different girsa. He has the word afilu, which appears twice, which basically changes to the same meaning that we're suggesting. So the ein lakpid bakach. You don't have to be makpid on that. Okay, so now, so that's the machlokit. In other words, Tanna Kama says you don't choose people with excessive strength to perform this. Rabbi Yehuda says you could choose people with excessive strength to perform. So Amar Rava Vate the Rabbi Yehuda Mistabra. So Rava says it makes sense like Rabbi Yehuda, meaning that it could be that the person who's giving the malkot is again has got the strength, has not got the intelligence. Why? Dichtiv lo Yosef pen Yosef. Right? What does the pasuk say? It says Arba'im yakenu lo Yosef pen Yosef lakoto ko ele makar abav nikla achicha le'einecha. Right? The Torah tells us, the pasuk says he'll hit him 40 times, which we've already explained is 39. It says lo Yosef, you may not add on to the lashes pen Yosef, because lest you add on, and if you add on extra lashes, you will come to kill the person inadvertently. We don't want that. So you need somebody who's going to understand. Whoever's administering the lashes needs to understand what's going on. Needs to understand that they don't give too many by mistake. So it says Rava like this. The Marava Kvatei Rabbi Yehuda Mistabra makes sense. We say like Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Because Dichtiv Lo Yosef Pen Yosef. The Torah has to go back and warn us and tell us twice. It says don't add on, lest you add on. It says I amalt bishlama mas chasirei meida. If we say like Rabbi Yehuda that you're talking about unintelligent people, therefore the Torah has to warn us, has to give you an extra azhara, lo Yosef pen Yosef, has to warn you all the more so, because there is a possibility you might not know, you might forget, etc. But if you're saying that the person is somebody who's very intelligent, so then why do you need to warn them? Obviously, they know they can't give extra lashes. So that is Rava's proof for Rabbi Yehuda from the pasuk. So Rabbanan says the Gemara, no, the Rabbanan would answer the following way. They say, Ein mezazin ela lemezuraz. This is an expression we have. It appears many, many places. Ein mezazin ela lemezurazin. In other words, we only go back and give the warnings. We give the chizuk and strengthening of the command to people who was rizim already, to people who are already going to we assume are going to listen and going to accept the commands and are committed to keeping it. And then we give extra strength, extra chizuk. And Marosh Kola always used to say, right, whenever it's you find this in the yeshivas, whenever they want to give mussar, say ein mezazin elam limzurazin, right? We're telling you, we're giving the strength. We assume that you already know the right thing. We assume you're already going to do the right thing and you're going to come and learn, etc. But nonetheless, mezazin limzurazin. Okay. So then next, right, says the Gemara, Tana. Shu magbiya b'shtei yadav, ukshu makeh b'yado achat. So when he lifts up the whip, he lifts it up, swings it back with both hands. But when he comes down to give the actual blow, that is done with one hand. So that it will come from his hand with all of his strength. In other words, lifting it up with two hands to sort of get the momentum. But then the idea is that the force comes from one hand. That will be stronger. V'hakore kore. So then we have two dots. The next thing in the Mishnah told us that you're reading these psukim, right? Etc. That these psukim are read whilst the Makkot are taking place. We saw here the Gemara, the Mishnah just assumed that it's obvious that you have somebody who reads, and it said, "What do we read?" And Rivan pointed out to us we have in the Gemara in Fritot where it derives the actual obligation to have to read the psukim while this takes place. So now, Sistan Rabbanan. So we have a beit din of three dayanim. The Braitaya is going to tell us exactly what the practice is, what each of the Dayanim has to do while this takes place. So you have the three Dayanim, and of course you have the Shaliach who's giving the Makkot. It's not the Dayan who is whipping the person himself. So it says Tana Rabbanan, Agadol Shebadayanin Kore. So the greatest in stature of the Dayanim, he reads the Psukim. Hasheni Moneh. The second one counts. V'ashlishi Omer Hakev. And the third one says, hit him, right? So essentially the first one is saying the psukim, the second one is counting 1, 2, 3, and each time, each number that he counts off, so the third dayan says 1, hit, 2, hit, right? That's how it goes. Bizman shemakam urba malich, bizman shemakam mueted mekatzer. In other words, the one who is reading, we know, we've learned already that there could be a different number of Malkot depending on what this person is able to withstand. So if there are more Malkot, so you read more slowly. And if there are fewer Malkot, then you read more quickly. But wait a minute, didn't the Mishnah say that if he finishes, what this seems like it's suggesting, is that you read the Psukim in order to finish at the same time as you finish the Malkot. So you speed up or slow down depending on how many there are. However, the Mishnah said that when he reaches the end of the pasuk, he starts again, right? So answer is mitzvah letzamtzem. The best would be that it should be read only once, and it should be done in such a way that he finishes with him. But if he didn't, then he goes back and starts again from the beginning. Now, there's something interesting which comes up here. As we said, that the three dayanim, each one has has to read a different thing. One of them has to count. So you remember, if we go back to the Mishnah just for a moment, we'll go back to the Mishnah at the bottom of Kaf Bet Amud Bet. So we learned the following din. We said, right, what happened if the person died from his malkut? We said the person giving his patur. But if osif lo od ritzua achat, v'meit harei ze golel yado. At the last line in the second last line in the Mishnah, we said that if the shaliach added on an extra makkah and then the person died, so he would have to go into the Ir Miklat. So now we explained what is the case where the person adds on an extra makkah if the person was meant to receive Well, before that, the Rambam learned this is the reason why we actually go from 40 to 39, right? That the Torah said 40. Others learned out that 40 actually means 39, but the Rambam understands that 40 means 40. But Chachamim came along and reduced it to 39 in case there's an extra one. And in case there's an extra one, you still haven't added on from what you lost count, but you haven't added on what the Torah said. But if, let's say, a person is sentenced to 18, for argument's sake, 18 Makkot, and the Shaliach Beit Din decides, for whatever reason, he says, oh, this guy doesn't really need 18, this guy can handle 19. So he gives him the 19th, and he dies. Well, that is not Shogeg, that is Shogeg Karov Lemezid. He's added on an extra one, and he can't do that. So the Bartanura says, what is the Mishnah referring to when it says you added on an extra one? It means he lost count. It means he was counting and he gave him the 19. He thought he just counted 17. It actually, like, Shvirat Omer, right? What did we count last night? So a person loses track. So he lost track, he thought he counted 17, but he'd actually counted 18, and then he gives the 19. So now the question is this. Who's counting? And the Gemara just told us that it's one of the Dayanim who's counting. So what do you mean? So if the Dayan counted wrong, and then the Shaliach Beit Din, because the Dayan counted wrong, he now has to go into an Ir Miklat. Seems a little bit harsh. So the Gemara in Bava Kama talks about this as well. And the Ktsot learns out from here an interesting principle. He says, you see from here, we know there is a principle in Halacha of Ein Shaliach Ledvar Avera, that when there is no Shaliach for an Avera. If I say, right, it's you say to a person, go and steal something on my behalf, go and go and do whatever transgression on my behalf. We say that a person, in that case, we don't say shlichut. We say the person who's acting should know what they're allowed to do based on the Torah. And if they have gone and done the transgression anyway, then it's them doing it. It's not as if they're acting on behalf of the shaliach. That is the principle. Okay, lots of discussions in the Gemara and the Rishonim, when it applies, when it doesn't apply. But that is the general principle of ein shliach ledvar avera. Would we say ein shliach ledvar avera when a person is shogeg, when a person isn't fully aware of what he's doing? So from here you see that yes, there is, because this shaliach, he was just going along, he was listening to the counting of the dayan. The dayan got the counting wrong, but nonetheless, he's the one who still hit the person. He's the one who killed them. You see further from here that maybe it's because you see that the shaliach needs to be counting along as well. Meaning this is not something which he was impossible for him to know. He needs to keep track of when the dayan is counting as well, in order that nobody should make a mistake. So that is regarding that point. Okay, so now the Gemara continues. We have another braita. We say Tanu Rabbanan. We are now about a third of the way from the bottom, a bit before, towards the end of the line. It says Tanu Rabbanan, Makar Rabbah. Ein li ela Makar Rabbah, Makar mu'etet minayin. So now we continue on talking about the case of what happens if a person gave too many. The person gave too many makot, as we've just explained this case where he gives him more than he was allowed to. So the Torah says makar rabbah, which means a great makar or many makot, right? Makar rabbah inela makar rabbah makar muetet minay. In other words, if the person gave an extra 3 makot or 4 or 5 more than he was meant to, then we understand that is considered makar rabbah. He's going to be liable, is going to be punished for that. Again, we're talking about the person administering the malkot more than he's meant to. But if it's makar mu'etet, if it's a few, if it's just 1 or 2, how do I know that one would be responsible for that as well? Talmud lomar lo yosif. From the fact that it says lo yosif, don't add on anything. So have a look over here at the Rivan. This is only part of the Braita, which the Gemara quotes for us. The Rivan quotes for us the rest of the Braita, which is helpful to understand. So he says here, he says near the top of the page, a little bit, a few lines down, about 6 or 7 lines, maybe 8 lines down from the narrow lines in Rivan. This is how we have the beginning of the Braita and the Sifra. Ein li ela bizman shemosifin al minyan arba'im. Right. So in other words, the writer begins like this. It says, I know that if the person was liable for 40, for the full quota of lashes, right? There I know that if the Chazan HaKnesset added on extra, then he would be liable. Right? Right, that's only when he adds on to all 40. I'll call Omed va'omed shamdu beitin minayin. But how do I know that if the Beit Din had come up with an assessment which was lower, 15 or 18 or 24, whatever it was, that he added on to that, because it's still within the number of 40, which the Torah said. How do I know that for that he'd be liable too? So minayin Talmud lomar lo yosif, because it says don't add lo yosif mikol makom, don't add anything. So then it says makaraba eni ala makaraba, etc. So from there it says makaraba. Says Eini dechayav lo yosif ela bizman shekal makot harbe ala omet. So there, from the fact that it says makaraba, so then I know that lo yosif, that don't add on, applies to if you add on extra, if you add on a lot, to what that original assessment was. But makot muatot, filu shtei makot or achat minayin, tasur lo yosif. In other words, how do I know if it's only a few makot, if it's only one or two, that it's been added onto the Yom? How do I know? Talmud lomar lo yosif. From the fact that the Torah tells us again, it says lo yosif lakoto, don't add anything. Lo yosif lakoto al eile al minyan ha'omed. Don't add on anything to the assessment. So that's what's telling us that even if it's one or two, and even if it's less than a quota of 40, nonetheless, if the person did that, they would be liable. So says the Gemara. So it said, reading again, Tan Rabbanan, Makar Rabba, Ini ala Makar Rabba, Makar Mueted Minayin, Lomar lo Yosef. So Im Ken, Matamud Lomar, Makar Rabba. Right. So this is confusing, because on the one hand, Makar Rabba makes it sound like it's only if you have a lot of extra Makot. Lo Yosef makes it sound like it is any. So why does it say Makar Rabba? It says Limed ala Rishonot Shehen Makar Rabba. So it teaches you that the first one is considered makar rabba. In other words, even if you have that number, which is less than, well, this is one way of learning it. This is the way I think that the Ritva learns. It says, even if you have that original number, which is the assessment the Beit Din made, it's 18 or it's 21 or whatever it is, but it's less than 40, that is still considered a makar rabba. That's one understanding. Another understanding, what the Rivan says, no, that what it means, shumakar rabba, that it still needs to be a great makar. In other words, that he has to hit him with all his with all his might. That it is a still considered a makar rabba, which he receives. You can see over here now Rivan again. There's different girsaot, but he says Yashu makar rabba shnetan lakoto, that he can hit him. Now text it says Baal Korcho. Baal Korcho means against his will, but you can see the small letter on the Masarat Hashas, which is a correction. Even in the Girsa of Tosfot Yom Tov and others, it says Sarech Lomar B'Kol Korcho. That he hits him with all his might. Okay. Then we get onto the final. I think it's the final din of our Mishnah, which talks about nitkalkel. Says that again, part of the idea here about the Makkot and this whole procedure, this whole ceremony, is that the person is disgraced. And the disgrace, the embarrassment that they get from coming to Beit Din and having this punishment administered, that is essentially what brings them kapara. So if the person received that embarrassment, that would be enough, and they were no longer liable for any more punishment. So we saw this earlier when we discussed the idea in the previous mission, when we discussed how the Beit Din makes an assessment of how much, and it could be that the person already received some of the Malkot, but then they look at him and they say, actually, he could receive the full quota. We say, no, since he's already come to Beit Din and he's already received, and it's already a bizayon for him, so that is enough. So another type of nit kalkel, the Mishnah said that if the person is essentially well, the discussion whether it's a man or a woman, we'll see. But if they wet themselves, or they right, or there's excrement, then that would be that would be considered a disgrace, and the person from that point onward would be patur, would be exempt from any more malkut. That's what the Mishnah said. It said nitkalkel bein b'ra'i bein b'mayim. Right, if a person causes a person to essentially perform their needs in public, whether it's urine or whether it's excrement, they would be exempt. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ha'ish b'ra'i v'haisha b'mayim. Rabbi Yehuda says no, for a man with urine that would not be so embarrassing, but for a woman it would. So now says the Gemara like this: there's nitkalkel tan Rabbanan echad ha'ish v'echad haisha b'ra'i v'lo b'mayim. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ha'ish b'ra'i v'haisha b'mayim. So we have a machloket here, machloket rishonim, which reflects the machloket in our machloket tanaim, which reflects the machloket in our Mishnah. According to Rabbi Meir, he says echad ha'ish v'echad haisha b'ra'i v'lo b'mayim. Okay, so this is a little bit different. Rabbi Meir says that for a man or a woman, it's if they urinate, that would not be, it would only be if they right b'ra'i v'lo b'mayim. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ha'ish b'ra'i v'haisha b'mayim. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda is, as we saw in the Mishnah, v'chachamim omrim echad ha'ish v'echad haisha ben b'ra'i ben b'mayim. So we have three opinions in the Braita, right? Tan Rabbanan again, echad ha'ish v'echad haisha b'ra'i v'lo b'mayim. So that is the most stringent opinion. That's Rabbi Meir. That says the same for man and woman. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ha'ish b'ra'i v'haisha b'mayim. Okay, now the Gemara is going to question. So it sounds a little bit strange when Rabbi Yehuda says initially it says ha'ish b'ra'i v'haisha b'mayim. Does that mean isha only b'mayim, only if she urinates? What if it's isha b'ra'i? That's why it sounds a little bit different to what we saw in the Mishnah. And it sounds a little bit counterintuitive. That is the Chachamim, same as the Mishnah. So now says the Gemara, Vatanya, Rabbi Yehuda me'echad ha'ish v'echad haisha b'ra'i. Right, in our Mishnah we said that Rabbi Yehuda said that both for our Mishnah said, right, Rabbi Yehuda, the Mishnah said Rabbi Yehuda Omer ha'ish b'ra'i v'haisha b'mayim. So here, now we're saying like this, Vatanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer echad ha'ish v'echad haisha b'ra'i. What does that mean? Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, shneim shavim b'ra'i. In other words, yeah, we're asking a question. We're saying, didn't Rabbi Yehuda say that when it comes to ra'i, that if it was excrements of both man and woman would be exempt from that point? In our Mishnah, in our Braita, we just said it sounds like saying it would only be the man who would be exempt and Isha would only be b'mayim. So how does Rabbi Yehuda say over here? Echad ha'ish v'echad haisha b'ra'i. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, he says no, it means they shneim shavin b'ra'i. In other words, when it comes to that, both would be the same. But what the Braita is going to teach you, Rabbi Yehuda is saying the same as he said in the Mishnah, that Aish would only require Ra'i in order for him to be exempt, and Aisha already, but even B'mayim would be exempt at that point, even if she urinates as a result of the Makkot. Okay, so now we have one more din related to our Mishnah, but I think we are out of time. So we'll stop it there. We'll finish that up tomorrow, and we'll move on to the next Mishnah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chodesh Tov.
Thank you so much.
Chodesh Tov, everyone.
Good to see everybody.